Well, SABC News reporter Nozintombi Miya was in court today and joins me now in studio. Nozintombi, always good to have you. Look, let's understand the merits of this case. How did we get here? We understand that Mahungela was denied bail today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alicia. I mean, it's been a month-long process because we initially began with this bail application hearing around the last week of November this year, and we've now concluded it in the last week of December. So it's been a month-long process that has had so many things happening. It has been one of those cases that are unprecedented. This is what the watching brief the term one of the watching briefs used, an unprecedented case when it comes to a bail hearing. So what normally happens with a bail hearing is that it's quite straightforward. The state will present an affidavit saying why they oppose bail or do not oppose bail, and the defense will then have a responding affidavit to say whether they why they feel their client should get bail. Typically, that's how it works. But in this case, with the fact that the defense brought their client onto the stand to be grilled, to be interrogated, had initially been for South Africa to hear the voice of this accused 21-year-old, because at the onset of it, what the defense lawyer, Advocate Itumeleng Maseko, had said was that this seemed to be a case of racial profiling.
Absolutely.
And it is true that State Prosecutor Advocate Ayanda Bakana, he really had a difficult case to fight. He really and truly it was a hard-won victory for him. But even at the most difficult moment in this case, he kept his cool, he was professional, he tried to give empathy, and I thought he said something so interesting. He said, it has been 20 hours since the defense has had the opportunity to present their case. Almost a full day, and the defense still was unable to prove their case. So that's the overarching issue about what was so different about this case. So we can go into the merits then about the charges as to why the magistrate herself spoke about each individual charge.
Absolutely. And Nozintombi, I mean, talking about those racial undertones, I know that the magistrates actually touched on that. Let's talk about that, because this case has seemingly divided society, as we've seen with previous cases where a black man is accused of murdering a white woman or vice versa.
Yeah, I thought it was so interesting for the magistrate judge, Seta Prinsloo, to mention in her judgment, and her judgment was about 45 minutes. But I felt that it was so important for her to acknowledge that in a country that has such deep racial divide and the past that we come from, we can't ignore the fact that racial undertones did play a factor in how the investigation was done. Not to say that the young boy was targeted because he's black, but decision making were influenced by the fact that this is a young black man who was in an area that is typically not a place where young black men go by themselves.
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
On one hand. But on the other hand, the state does have sufficient proof to show that they link him close to where the body of Kirsten Kluyts was found, and the fact that he was wearing a t-shirt, etc., etc. Again, it goes back to the issue of they've managed to prove everything else, and the accused has agreed with everything else, but they haven't managed to make the case of whether or not he has killed her. At the end of the day, all that Judge Prinsloo has done today was to deny him bail. She has not made a judgment as to whether or not he is guilty or not guilty. All she said is, based on the merits and based on all the information that is there, him having the audacity to take off the clothes of a woman who he at the time thought had died. Her body was lying there, it was prone, took off her clothes, put her shirt on, jumped over the gate and hid the evidence. That for her was sufficient reason for the judge to say that he's denied bail on that basis, and that he is a danger to women, to society and himself. But it's not a judgment on whether he's guilty or he's not guilty. We still don't know whether he killed her or he didn't kill her. There's insufficient evidence at this moment to make a judgment on that until we get to trial.
You know, Nozintombi, you mentioned the merits of the case. I mean, the defense, of course, it's very interesting that you mentioned they had 20 hours to submit arguments for grounds of bail, but they couldn't. But they stipulated that this is a weak case, solely based on the CCTV footage, as you've just said now. It does not prove that he did actually commit the crime. So going forward now, there were issues raised about the psychological state of Mahungela. Let's talk about that. Are these things that are going to come out when the trial commences on the 19th of January?
Undoubtedly, undoubtedly. None of us are medical experts. The media are not medical experts.
We cannot diagnose him.
The judge is not a medical expert. Neither are the lawyers. So when we get to trial, there needs to be a formal application that's put together where he will undergo medical assessments. But that's still down the line. What we're dealing with right now is the issue of the appeals. And with the charges, the 3 charges, this is so important, the 3 charges, right? We know the first one was rape.
Yes.
The second one was robbery with aggravated circumstances. The third one was premeditated murder. Now let's talk about the rape one in specific, because that was the charge that Judge Prinsloo said that the state had not made a sufficient case on. Now the post-mortem results showed that that Kluyts did not show any signs at the time of being violated sexually. And for them, that then meant that up until the district surgeon does a formal post-mortem on her body, they cannot say that she was raped. So based on that case, based on those facts, the judge then said it is improbable, it's seemingly improbable that he raped her. Therefore, the state's case on the allegation of rape is weak. So we'll see on the 19th whether the state will now update or change the charges. But the 2 big charges, the 2 Schedule 6 charges that this young 21-year-old boy is dealing with is the issue of premeditated murder, the issue of robbery. We do know he took her clothes.
Absolutely.
It was robbery.
There is CCTV footage of him wearing the shirt of the deceased.
Exactly.
Yes.
That is robbery.
And he has actually alluded and in fact admitted to it.
Absolutely. Defeating the ends of justice by hiding the evidence. That already is problematic. Now the issue around the premeditated murder still needs to be investigated.
All right.
You know, Judge Prinsloo said something very important, that it could take a person less than 5 seconds to decide that they want to commit a murder, and that already is considered, it's the definition of premeditated. That still needs to be a case that is proven when the trial begins. But the saddest part about this entire story is not that this 21-year-old boy has spent Christmas in jail, will spend New Year's in jail, or that the family of the 34-year-old teacher will never spend Christmases and New Year's with their daughter, and their grandson, who was due to be born, I mean, she was what, about 4 months pregnant, 14 weeks. The tragedy of this case is that there are 2 families that have forever been broken. And the issue of the racial undertones, as you said, have divided the country. When you look at social media, when you look at any content that the SABC has provided and comments that are coming from there, you look and you see the clear divide between those people who believe him along racial lines and those people who don't believe him along racial lines. And that's the real tragedy.
Nozintombi, I wish we had more time, because I also wanted to get into how, how you observed the both families, how are they actually going through this grueling time.
I can tell you very quickly.
Very quickly, Nozintombi, you're going to get
family was very, very sad. The father was very heartbroken.
Yes.
A heartbroken father. His mother had a heart attack and she physically cannot come there because of the shock. What is confusing, what I found confusing though, was that the Kluyts family only came once and hasn't come since. So that I thought was quite interesting.
Nozintombi, thank you so much as always for your insightful update there. That is SABC News reporter Nozintombi Miya on the Bafana Mahungela case.